The very first paragraph of a book is our opportunity to show the reader a spark of something, a hint at some buried depth, a smoke signal from later in the story, or a haunting narrative voice. Far easier said than done, of course, but the more we can learn about how to start a story, the better. I'm Kieran, I'm a writer and a freelance editor, and I asked my followers to send me their first paragraphs for feedback. I'm going to talk about what I think they did well and what I think they could do better, as well as give an overall impression of their work. We're talking broad strokes, not destructive analysis here, and it's all just my opinion based on the paragraph in and of itself with no context. A huge thank you if you sent me your work. These first entries are from my Patreon supporters and they're all anonymous, otherwise I'd thank you all individually. I couldn't quite cover them all in one video, so don't worry, if you're not in this one, you'll be in the next one. Alright, let's get started with the very first opening paragraph. Bollocks. The plastic lid had cracked, and now Tika leaked from the paper bag, dribbling down my new jeans. I shifted my tote to the other shoulder, juggling the takeaway and headphones. The wheelie case banged down the steps after me as I hopped onto the pavement. Cheers, drive, I called back automatically to the empty cab, the old phrase popping into my head unbidden. Okay, so what strikes me first about this is that it's got a really strong sense of character voice. It's quite casual in both the dialogue and the narration. And if you're not from the UK or Australia maybe, you might have to Google the first word there, but be careful Googling that. I like that there's a moment that draws a bit of empathy here. Everyone's going to empathise with spilling food down your new jeans in the middle of the day or while you're out and about. And although it's a very small thing, it's not a massive emotional impact, you're still making the reader feel a little something there, and that just starts a connection between the reader and the character, and I like that. I also like that we're starting in the middle of a moving scene here. There's momentum from the off, we're opening in the middle of the action, as it were. This might be revealed in the genre or the blurb possibly, but to me, with no context at all, there's an open question at the end here with this last bit. Why is the cab empty? Why is the character still kind of expecting there to be a person there? There's a suggestion that maybe this is a new thing, maybe the story takes place in the future. I don't know. The point is, I'm asking myself a question about what I'm reading here, and I think that's always a good thing to have in your first paragraph. In terms of what could be improved here, I'm kind of conflicted. I want to say that we're very focused in, we're very minute to minute, second to second here with this character. However, because the character is balancing this stuff and trying to deal with their case as well as hold these things all in one hand and they spill stuff on themselves, it's all going wrong. I think it's supposed to feel a little bit all on top of you, a little bit claustrophobic, so that might be intentional. But what I'd be hoping for is that the next paragraph after this is going to show the story widening a little bit, opening up and seeing some sort of wider context that will help you to put a visual image in your mind. If that happens, I think it'll offset some of the tightness of this first paragraph, but whatever the case, it's full of character. In fact, I'll take inspiration from this opening and keep up some momentum myself by jumping straight to the next one. Dr. Leah Kaplan's legs felt like warm rubber as she walked a narrow path just inches from a 100-foot drop to the canyon floor. With every hesitant step, the archaeologist struggled to imagine how ancient peoples were born, lived and died in the rough stone homes embedded within the crumbling canyon walls. Okay, so also opening mid-scene here, which I like. This feels like more of a traditional introductory first paragraph in terms of tone, and I like that too. There's a good sense of tension as we basically overhang this 100-foot drop to the floor. Nice to have a bit of drama in there straight away and something to grab at the reader's attention. I also like that there's some scale here, and I don't just mean in a physical sense either. We obviously have the smallness of Dr. Owen, the character, and then the 100-foot drop that she's positioned right next to, so we've got that comparison. But the other way scale comes into it is in terms of time. We've got this small moment as the character edges along the path, but then we've compared that to ancient peoples being born, living and dying in this area. So I like the comparison between the small and the large there as well. Again, I don't know anything about the genre or the story, but for me, this opening feels like it sets us up for a kind of grand adventure story maybe. My criticism here, and you might have spotted it from how I was reading this out, is that there's two fairly long, fairly complex sentences back to back. And I think the second one here probably could do with being split into two for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I found myself short of breath getting to the end of the the sentence, which is usually a good test that you need some sort of punctuation in there, or better yet, split up into more than one paragraph. The other reason is everything here in this long sentence is interesting. It all deserves to have its day in the reader's mind. And I think if you cut it up and allow a reader to pause, they'll be able to absorb what they're reading and have it register on them a bit more clearly. So that would be my advice for this. But again, there's a bit of tension, there's an open question in why is she there? And there's a sense of scale, which I always like. All right, next one. The train lurched out of the station with its familiar wheeze, sounding like an old man struggling for breath. I had the car to myself, thank God. It was nearly 11 p.m. and the day left me raw. I couldn't bear the thought of making polite conversation with a stranger. Okay, there's a theme of long days and transport coming in here, which is just a strange coincidence. I really like the personification of the train. That kind of thing always appeals to me, as I tend to see the world that way too, and that's how I kind of approach writing. Plus, that line gives us what I was looking for really in that first paragraph that we saw, which is some overall context. Okay, we're on a train, just as simple as that. Maybe it's just how my mind works and how I imagine things, but I find that headline often helps me just imagine things visually and bring more detail to a scene within my mind's eye. I'd say you could probably remove the word sounding from this first line and have the whole thing read a little more smoothly. The word wheeze by itself or by its nature is an auditory word anyway, so I don't think we really need sounding there. We could go, it's familiar wheeze, like an old man struggling for breath. There's definitely a sense of character here. They seem exhausted, burned out, which makes sense with it being late at night, so that's consistent. But it does also make me wonder what might have happened during the day. Is this a standard day or has something particularly bad happened? The main thing I think could enhance this, though, is simply changing the order around. I think we've got a chance to build some tension here and then to pay it off, and we're not taking advantage of that in the current order. What I would do is, after this first line's finished, I would then talk about it being nearly 11 p.m. and then go into the thought of talking to random strangers, maybe even go into the kind of weirdos that you encounter at that time of night on the train. And then I would finally say, I had the car to myself, thank God, at the end to pay off that. So let us build up to the, oh no, are they going to walk into this situation, and then pay it off at the end and calm things down again, like the character's taking a big breath. That way it's also in chronological order, which I just think is neater. Other than that, I think giving more of a sense of what's made it such a terrible day, I think would be a good advantage too, if you can pique our interest that little bit more there. On to the next one then. Darkness. Captain Brewer stared into the void as if he were looking into the face of death itself, and for all he knew, he was. The enemy was out there, somewhere, waiting to find the scant remains of the human race. He fumbled for his headlamp. Exposed to the unforgiving elements, he hadn't considered if it was night or day. It didn't matter. Earth was always dark, aside from the ominous orange glow behind the rolling black clouds. Except for his own breathing, there was no sight or sound of anything living. It had all been destroyed years before he was born. Okay, so the first thing that strikes me about this is that opening word, darkness. Unapologetically blunt and direct. I like that. There's a certain tone-setting quality to it. I like the opening scene in general from a visual perspective, this stoic character staring out into whatever may come. The description here is nice too. I like any reference to light in basically any capacity in writing. I find it atmospheric and it helps me build that visual picture that I'm always talking about. And I like that this is Earth, but not quite as we know it. That brings the obvious, logical question, why don't we know it? What's happened to our Earth? Why is it like this? This might be covered in the genre or the blurb as well, but I think more physical shape here would be a good idea. Are we on the bridge of a ship here? Are we on a watchtower or a cliff edge or in the middle of the desert? Where on Earth, literally, are we? Something like that I think would be a good addition. I'd also be tempted to dial up the drama on this particular line about what's waiting out there too. I don't know if this would fit the story, but I'd like to see it say, hunting down the scant remains of the human race or something like that. Something that's more foreboding, brings a bit more apprehension and tension to it. I think that would fit the overall atmosphere here. Other than that, and a couple of wording fixes here and there, I think this is a really solid opening. I like the atmosphere. As I said, I like the stoic character staring out into the darkness. It's full of possibilities and open questions, and I like that. On to the next one then. This one's a bit longer, so bear with me on the reading. Prologue. Let's begin at the end so we can start at the beginning. In 2025, the hum in the Virginia Inn is lower now, softer. The crowds have thinned and soon the doors will close for good. Its lease is up in early September and its future hangs in the balance. The reasons why are less important than what will be lost: a gathering place, a silent witness to the spirit of the city. In the back, nestled in its usual spot opposite the northern exposed brick wall, sits table number 7. Its dark wood surface, once smooth and lustrous, now bears the topography of time. A constellation of water rings maps decades of drinks nursed, celebrated, or wept over. Innumerable elbows have polished the edges smooth, while a geography of scratches tells of dropped keys, emphatic gestures, and maybe a hastily set down tool bag from a long ago repairman. A folded piece of cardboard wedged under the right side of its one leg for years keeps it steady on hexagonal tiles that are somehow still pristine 122 years after their installation. Each imperfection is an absorbed echo of the myriads of lives it's touched, their laughter, arguments, heartbreaks and revelations. People separated by decades, sat here without ever knowing who came before or who would come after, yet were bound by their shared need for a place of struggle or celebration. The table keeps their secrets, offering no judgment, only a steadfast connection that can still be felt. Okay, this is a really interesting one because what struck me most about it is that it's kind of a paradox in a sense. There's nobody here. There's no human character present, yet this passage is also jam-packed with humanity, or the echoes of them. And I think that creates a really distinctive effect. And for a prologue, I think when we read it through the lens that this is scene setting for the story, I think you can get away with it. I'd say if this were the opening chapter, for example, I would want to see a character. I would want to see less description. But for something that is setting up the story, I think it works. I really like all the small moments. This is something that I often enjoy in short fiction. The tiny, unnoticed happenings that make up human life. I like it when stories capture those for a moment and then use them to typify life in a grander sense. Plus, I think there's, that sense of scale here too, which I talked about before. I do have to comment on this opening line. You probably expected me to suggest cutting this, and for me, the jury's kind of out on that. Having reached the end of the passage, I can see what it means and what it refers to, and I can see the function that it has, but I do wonder whether it could be perhaps stated more smoothly. Additionally, this is a really small thing, but I think in 2025, there could probably be added onto the prologue or be a chapter header or something. That way, I think the first line would just be the hum in the Virginia Inn is lower now, softer, which to me is a bit more smooth and a bit stronger. So overall, as a prologue, I can get behind this, even though it's full of very detailed description, which I'm not usually a fan of. I think in this context, it works. And whether you agree with me or not on these points, by the way, that is all right. If you don't agree with me, don't assume that you're wrong, and don't assume I'm wrong. Reading is subjective, and keeping an open mind, I found, is often the best way to reflect on what we're reading. What I'd intended this exercise to do is just show how valuable it is to get another pair of eyes on your work, first of all, from either a friend or an editor, and to also just to spend some time thinking critically about what we read and what it means. Every time I do that, and lucky for me, being an editor, I get to do it a lot, I find it fills me with this new appreciation for writing and writers and the magic of the craft. It takes real guts to send your work out to someone to critique, especially when that person is then going to put it on YouTube. So I really appreciate everyone who sent me paragraphs. If I didn't get you this time, I will get you next time. If this video does well and people like it, I might open this idea up a bit more. So if you'd like to get your first paragraph featured like this, the best way is to join my mailing list or to follow me on Patreon, either the free or the paid version, because that's where I'll likely post to ask for more submissions. Links for those are down below. Thank you so much for watching as always, and happy writing.